Imagine opening a sealed bottle of commercial drinking water. Like, it looks perfectly clear, perfectly pristine. You take a sip.
Right, it feels totally safe.
Exactly. But what you can't see is that you might have just swallowed up to 13,225 microscopic plastic particles
Yeah.
in just a single liter.
Which is just staggering when you actually visualize it.
It's terrifying. And we aren't talking about water scooped out of a polluted river, you know? We're talking about a sealed factory-fresh bottle. So today we are exploring an invisible synthetic world that you, me, literally everyone is completely surrounded by.
Yeah, it really is a profound shift in our physical reality. I mean, we are living in an era where the water we rely on, the ecosystems around us, and even our own bodies are fundamentally changing on a microscopic level.
Right.
And the implications for public health and, well, planetary sustainability are just massive. The science is honestly only just beginning to catch up to the sheer scale of the infiltration.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, our mission is to unpack a really comprehensive, multi-country scientific review on the rapidly growing crisis of microplastic pollution. And we are specifically focusing on Asian aquatic environments today.
Yeah, it's a colossal stack of data.
It really is. The researchers synthesized data across dozens of countries to build this regional map of the contamination. But more importantly, we're going to look at the mechanical why and how behind this pollution. How exactly does a microscopic plastic fragment destroy a fish's liver?
Or how it crosses the human placenta, which is a huge finding.
Exactly. And ultimately, what does this pervasive contamination mean for you?
It's an incredibly vital review because when we connect the specific data to the broader global picture, I mean, we are looking at one of the most pressing public health and environmental challenges of the 21st century.
Yeah.
This isn't just about litter anymore, right? It's about altering the baseline chemistry of the entire aquatic food web.
Right. And since you are tuning in, you probably already know the basics of microplastics, particles less than 5 millimeters in size. We know the difference between primary microplastics, like the manufactured microbeads in cosmetics.
The ones they put in face scrubs and toothpaste, yeah.
Exactly. And then secondary microplastics, which are the fibers shedding from your polyester clothes in the wash, or fragments of degrading plastic bags. But what really stands out to me in this review, though, isn't just the definition of the plastic. It's the specific focus on the Asian context. Why is this geographical region acting as the epicenter for this kind of environmental data?
Well, what's fascinating here is the sheer velocity of change. Over the last few decades, I mean, many parts of Asia have experienced this massive boom in industrialization. You have unprecedented urban population density and just surging economic growth.
Which sounds like a good thing on paper, right?
Right, but here is the critical friction point. The infrastructure simply couldn't keep pace with the consumption. I mean, when you inject billions of tons of synthetic polymers into economies where the municipal waste management systems and wastewater treatment facilities are still, developing.
Plastic has nowhere to go.
Exactly. It has nowhere to go straight into the hydrology of the region.
It's the friction between rapid economic acceleration and the lag in civic infrastructure. And the geography plays a huge role too, right? Because you have these massive monsoon seasons and intense hydrological cycles.
Yeah, they act like a giant conveyor belt.
A conveyor belt flushing all that urban runoff directly into major waterways. I mean, I kind of picture it like this indestructible, toxic glitter. It washes down our drains, gets swept up in the monsoon, and it just never, ever truly goes away.
That is a highly accurate, if slightly depressing, way to look at it.
Let's actually map this out, because the review provides a geographic tour of the contamination across 4 main Asian regions. And the disparities are just wild.
Oh, the regional differences are staggering. So let's look at Southeast Asia first. The data shows Malaysia dealing with extensively high concentrations. They're averaging about 1,670 particles per liter of water.
Wow.
And Cambodia is also severely impacted, showing around 569 particles per liter.
Let's just pause on that number to visualize it. 1,670 particles per liter. A liter is, what, about 4 cups of water?
Give or take, yeah.
So that means in every single drop of water you examine under a microscope, there are multiple synthetic fragments. That is a fundamentally altered liquid at that point.
It is. It's synthetic soup.
Yeah.
And as we move to East Asia, the data shows China with highly elevated levels as well, averaging about 374 particles per liter.
Still incredibly high.
Right. And South Asia is similarly burdened, largely due to intense industrial activity along these really critical waterways.
Yeah.
India, for example, is averaging 145 particles per liter.
And these aren't just tiny streams, right?
No, we're seeing these loads in massive, vital surface rivers, the Ganga, the Yangtze, the Sitoram, as well as lakes, reservoirs, and coastal estuaries. But then, and this is the interesting part, you look at West Asia.
Right.
Countries like Turkey and Saudi Arabia report remarkably low concentrations, often under 3 particles per liter.
3 particles compared to over 1,000, which immediately tells us this isn't just some geographical inevitability, right?
Exactly.
It's heavily influenced by policy. The review credits those lower numbers in West Asia to stricter environmental regulations and, highly effective waste management systems. But here's where I kind of want to push back on the data, or at least how we interpret it.
Go ahead.
So we're talking heavily about surface water, rivers and lakes exposed to open air, urban runoff, direct industrial dumping. Logically, if we pull from deep subterranean groundwater, like miles below the surface, shouldn't the Earth's natural filtration protect us? Or, as we mentioned at the start, commercially sealed bottled water. Is the contamination actually reaching those secure sources, or is it just happening at the bottling plant?
That is exactly the right question to ask. And the review's findings here are deeply unsettling because the answer is both.
Both. Wait, so the groundwater isn't safe either?
Let's start with the groundwater. You would think that geological layers would act as a natural sieve, right? Like a giant Brita filter.
Yeah, exactly. Rock and sand filtering it out.
But microplastics are so infinitesimally small, and our use of agricultural plastics like the plastic mulch films used in farming is so pervasive that these particles are literally leaching through the soil profile. They're infiltrating deep subterranean aquifers. Studies in India and Korea found significant microplastic loads deep underground.
So the Earth's filter is failing simply because we've fundamentally changed the size of the pollutant. It's too small for the dirt to catch.
Exactly. But what about the bottled water? You mentioned that crazy statistic of 13,000 particles per liter in Malaysia.
Yeah, if it's not all coming from the aquifer, where is it coming from?
The bottling process itself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, think about the mechanical stress of manufacturing. The plastic packaging, the high-pressure water jets used to clean the bottles on the assembly line, the mechanical shearing when the plastic cap is screwed on and off.
So just opening the bottle sheds plastic into it.
Exactly. All of these generate thousands of microscopic PAT and polypropylene fragments that shed directly into the water. You are essentially drinking the structural degradation of the packaging.
Which brings up a massive methodological hurdle that I found incredibly fascinating in this review. Finding these microscopic fragments in highly polluted river water, or even a sealed bottle, seems harder than finding a needle in a haystack. I mean, it's like finding a transparent needle in a pile of slightly larger needles.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
How are researchers actively identifying and proving these are synthetic polymers? Like, how do they know it's not just natural organic debris or sand?
It requires some very, very sophisticated analytical chemistry. The gold standards highlighted in the review are Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, usually just called FTIR, and Raman spectroscopy.
Okay, let's unpack those mechanisms because the science here is wild. How does bouncing light off a microscopic speck tell a scientist that it came from a synthetic textile versus a piece of algae?
Well, it all comes down to molecular vibrations.
Vibrations?
Yeah. Every chemical bond in a molecule, like the carbon backbone of a polyethylene bag, vibrates at a very specific, unique frequency. So with Raman spectroscopy, scientists shoot a highly focused laser at the particle.
Okay.
Most of the light bounces off normally. But a tiny, tiny fraction of that light actually interacts with the vibrating molecular bonds of the plastic. The bond absorbs a little bit of the laser's energy and then scatters the rest.
And they can read that scatter.
Exactly. By measuring the exact wavelength of that scattered light, scientists get a molecular fingerprint. They compare that fingerprint against the database, and the computer tells them, yes, this is definitively polyethylene terephthalate, or PT.
That is brilliant. They are literally listening to the frequency of the chemical bonds.
Basically, yes.
And the dominant polymers they are finding through this fingerprinting are polyethylene, polypropylene, PET, and polystyrene. Essentially, the structural building blocks of modern human convenience. Packaging, synthetic clothing, takeout containers.
Right. And beyond just the chemical makeup, the reviewers looked at the morphology, the physical shapes of the plastics. Fibers are incredibly dominant across these Asian aquatic systems.
Where it come from clothes, right?
Mostly, yeah. largely originating from synthetic textiles, shedding in washing machines, and also the breakdown of fishing nets in coastal areas. But what's equally important to the shape is the color.
Right, the colors they found were really interesting.
Researchers are finding blue, black, red, and yellow particles, but an enormous percentage of what they find is completely transparent.
And this is where it gets really interesting to me. Because a
Hmm.
transparent plastic particle isn't just a color, right? It's a timeline. It tells a chronological story.
Exactly. How so?
Well, plastics and consumer goods are usually dyed. They're brightly colored. If a scientist finds a transparent fragment in a river, it's a huge indicator of severe photooxidation.
Sun damage.
Right. It means that plastic has been exposed to intense UV radiation from the sun for a very long time. That radiation breaks down the polymer chains and physically strips the pigment. So it tells us we are looking at aged, highly brittle pollution that is actively on its way to fragmenting into even smaller pieces.
That's a crucial insight. And trying to quantify all of this, all these transparent fragments and fibers across different countries, presented a massive standardization nightmare for the reviewers.
I can imagine.
Before this review, one study in China might report findings in items per cubic meter, while a study in India used items per liter, and then another used milligrams per kilogram of sediment.
Oh, that's just a mess.
It was. The researchers had to painstakingly run mathematical conversions on all this disparate data to establish a single, standardized baseline particles per liter, just so we could have a coherent regional map to look at.
It really highlights how new this field of study actually is, We don't even have a globally agreed upon unit of measurement yet.
Exactly.
But now that we have the standardized map, we need to talk about what these billions of fibers and transparent fragments are actually doing once they are in the water. Because they aren't just passively floating, they are actively infiltrating the aquatic food web.
Very actively, yes.
I tend to visualize it like an underwater buffet, but it's entirely stocked with wax fruit. The animals, the fish, mollusks, crustaceans, they're consuming it because it mimics their natural food. But it provides zero caloric value. And worse, it actively damages their biology.
That wax fruit analogy perfectly captures the initial stage of ingestion. Aquatic organisms take in these particles either by actively eating them or through dermal contact, where fibers actually get trapped in their gills.
Oh, that sounds awful.
It is. But the biological damage goes far beyond just a lack of nutrition or physical blockage. The review synthesizes toxicological data from real-world models. We're talking trout, zebrafish, various crustaceans, and the physiological cascade is just devastating.
Right.
When these microplastics enter the tissues, they trigger the overproduction of ROS, or reactive oxygen species.
Okay, let's slow down and really look at the mechanism of ROS, because from what I read, this is the engine of the biological damage. What exactly is a reactive oxygen species, and why does a tiny plastic fragment cause a fish's cells to suddenly produce them?
To understand ROS, we have to look at the atomic level. Oxygen molecules in a healthy cell normally have paired electrons. They're chemically stable.
Right, balanced.
Balanced, exactly.
Right.
But when a foreign synthetic body like a microplastic infiltrates a tissue, it causes severe physical and chemical stress to the cell. This stress causes the oxygen molecules to split improperly, leaving them with an unpaired electron.
Oh, I see.
These are reactive oxygen species, also known as free radicals. Because they have that missing electron, they are incredibly unstable, and they are desperate to find another electron to pair with.
So they start stealing electrons from wherever they can get them inside the fish's body.
Precisely. They start ripping electrons off the lipids in the cell membranes, the proteins, and even the cell's DNA.
Wow.
This chain reaction of cellular destruction is what we call oxidative stress. The cell membranes literally begin to rupture. And in response, the organism's immune system panics. It releases signaling proteins called cytokines to trigger inflammation, trying to heal the damage.
But the body can't heal it, right? Because it's plastic.
Exactly. Because the plastic particle can't be broken down by the body's natural enzymes, the inflammation never stops. It becomes a chronic, destructive state.
It's the body perpetually attacking itself, trying to kill an invincible invader.
That's exactly what's happening.
And the review details how this leads to apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. It causes stunted growth, severe behavioral changes, and even reproductive abnormalities in these aquatic populations. But it doesn't stop with the individual fish, does it? because of bioaccumulation and biomagnification.
Right. So bioaccumulation means the plastic builds up in a single fish faster than it can excrete it. It's just collecting in their tissues.
Okay.
But biomagnification means as you move up the trophic levels, so the little fish eats the plankton, the big fish eats a dozen little fish, the apex predator eats the big fish, the concentration of these plastics multiplies exponentially at every single step.
Which brings us to the most critical realization of this entire review, the part that really impacts the listener directly. Who sits at the very top of that trophic ladder?
We do.
Humans are the ultimate sink for this pollution. If microplastics are inducing oxidative stress and DNA damage in the liver of a trout, what is happening inside the human body?
The implications for human health are honestly the most urgent focus of modern toxicological research right now. And it's really vital for you to realize that your exposure isn't just limited to eating a contaminated piece of fish.
Right, it's not just a seafood problem.
Not at all. The major routes of human exposure are ubiquitous. We are consuming them through drinking water, obviously, but also through the broader agricultural food chain. Because remember, they are in the groundwater being absorbed by crops.
Right.
They're in table salt. And we are even exposed through inhalation. We are literally breathing in synthetic fibers suspended in indoor and outdoor air every day.
The review mentions some estimates on human ingestion, suggesting we take in tens of thousands of particles annually. And for a long time, there was this comforting myth that plastic was biologically inert. Right?
Oh, yeah. The old assumption.
Yeah, that if you swallowed a tiny piece of plastic, it would just pass harmlessly through your gastrointestinal tract, like a swallowed penny or something. But the data absolutely shatters that myth.
Completely shatters it. The clinical evidence of human infiltration is undeniable now. Microplastics have been detected in human stool, colectomy samples, saliva, and hair. But the most alarming discovery and a massive focal point of recent science is their detection in the human placenta,
The placenta.
a phenomenon that researchers are now referring to as the plasticenta.
The plasticenta.
Right.
I mean, think about the gravity of that for a second. Before a human being takes their very first breath, while they are still developing in the womb, their biological barrier has already been breached by synthetic polymers. How is a plastic particle physically crossing the placental barrier? And what is it doing to our endocrine system?
Well, the ability to cross these biological barriers really comes down to size and chemical properties. The smaller the particle gets, especially as it degrades toward the nanoscale, the easier it slips between cellular junctions in the body.
Just slipping right through the gaps.
Exactly. And once inside, the potential health consequences mirror those aquatic models we talked about: gastrointestinal disturbances, chronic inflammation, immune system disruption. But the endocrine disruption is particularly insidious.
Because of the chemicals in the plastic.
Yes, plastics contain plasticizers. These are chemicals added to make them flexible or durable, like BPA or phthalates. Many of these chemicals are structural mimics of human hormones.
Meaning the human body mistakes the plasticizer for something like estrogen or testosterone.
Exactly. This molecular mimicry disrupts a process called steroidogenesis, which is simply how your body synthesizes hormones. The plastics combine to cellular receptors, blocking natural hormones or triggering unnatural responses.
Which cascades into a whole host of problems.
It does. It can severely alter cortisol levels, drive metabolic diseases, and lead to serious reproductive toxicity.
And the physical plastic particle itself is really only half the threat. One of the most fascinating and frankly terrifying mechanisms outlined in the review is the Trojan horse effect. The plastic is essentially acting as a microscopic delivery vehicle for other toxins. How does that mechanism work in the water before it even enters our bodies?
It's driven by hydrophobic interactions. Plastics are generally hydrophobic, meaning they naturally repel water. Now, many of the most dangerous chemicals floating in our rivers, like persistent organic pollutants, POPs, and heavy metals, are also hydrophobic.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. When these toxins are in a waterway, they naturally gravitate toward the surface of the microplastics to escape the water molecules. The microplastic basically acts like a highly absorbent sponge, or a raft.
So it's accumulating this concentrated outer layer of heavy metals, pharmaceutical runoff, and even pathogenic bacteria and antibiotic-resistant genes.
Yes. So when you ingest that microplastic, it bypasses your body's primary defenses. It acts as a Trojan horse that smuggles a concentrated payload of toxic chemicals and pathogens directly into your bloodstream and tissues.
So synthesizing all of this, We have a situation where the structural building blocks of our economy are degrading, infiltrating global water systems, biomagnifying up the food chain, crossing the human placenta, and acting as toxic delivery vehicles.
It sounds incredibly bleak when you list it out like that.
It sounds insurmountable. If we look at the path forward outlined in the review, how do we even begin to mitigate a problem that is practically invisible and everywhere at once?
It requires a systemic, multi-tiered approach.
Yeah.
But the review does give us clear, actionable pathways. We already discussed the evidence from West Asia. Strong governmental regulations and advanced waste management make a massive, measurable difference.
So policy works.
Policy absolutely works. Technologically, we need to rapidly upgrade wastewater treatment facilities with advanced technologies, things like membrane bioreactors, which are actually highly effective at capturing microplastics before they enter rivers.
But capturing it at the wastewater plant is still treating the symptom, isn't it? The review pushes heavily for a transition to a circular economy. We have to stop designing virtually indestructible materials for single-use, transient purposes. The linear model of make, use, dispose is literally what got us here.
Precisely. We need biodegradable alternative and a fundamental shift in manufacturing. And from a scientific standpoint, the reviewers emphasize the urgent need for harmonized global methodologies so we can actually track this accurately across borders.
Right, fixing that standardization nightmare.
Exactly. We also desperately need long-term human biomonitoring, particularly focusing on vulnerable populations like children and pregnant women. We need that data to truly understand the chronic effects of this exposure over decades.
It really puts a profound new perspective on every aspect of daily life, from the clothes we wash to the water we drink. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought that builds on this idea of degradation.
Okay.
We talked about microplastics being small enough to cross the placenta. But the physical reality of plastic in the environment is that it never truly disappears, right? It just continuously degrades and shrinks.
Right.
As these microplastics age, they become nanoplastics. These are particles less than a single micrometer in size. At that unfathomably small scale, researchers believe they behave more like chemicals than physical objects. They're potentially small enough to cross the blood-brain barrier and accumulate directly in the human brain.
Wow.
It is an entirely new frontier of neurotoxicology that we are only just beginning to untangle, reminding us that the life cycle of plastic doesn't end when it breaks down. It just unlocks a new level of biological access.
It's a deeply sobering reality, and it underscores exactly why interdisciplinary research and aggressive policy intervention are no longer optional.
Thank you for joining us in this episode on the presence of microplastics in Asian water systems and their potential health consequences. We hope this discussion has provided valuable insights into one of the most significant environmental challenges facing our world today. Microplastic pollution is not only an environmental issue, but also a matter of public health, sustainability, and global responsibility. Through scientific research, informed policymaking, technological innovation, and collective action, meaningful progress can be made toward reducing plastic pollution and protecting both ecosystems and human well-being. We sincerely appreciate your